So, hey, everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host for Sales and Cigars. Today I had an interesting episode with a young man from Quebec, Montreal, Brenden. He's just a super smart. He dropped so many gold nuggets into this episode. So if you're a salesperson, if you're a sales leader, if you're a CEO, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're just a person trying to get better at communicating, you got to pay attention to this episode. He just drops these ideas of things that we can do to practice and engage in our own relationships, and some really cool tips for us to stand out as an individual producer. So man, go grab a cocktail, go grab a cigar, and strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So, Brenden, welcome to Sales and Cigars podcast. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to jump on with us.
Walter, the pleasure's mine. Thanks for having me.
So you're coming to us from Quebec, Canada, Montreal, right?
You got it. Born and raised.
Right. So you have to excuse my accent. Got that combination Midwestern New Yorker kind of an accent that pops out a little bit. You don't have the traditional kind of Quebec. I don't any French at all in your
in my accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I am fluent in French, Walter, but you're right that the accent's really hard to tell. Donc quand je parle français, when I switch languages, the accent stays the same. It took a lot of work, but we made it.
That does take a lot of work, unless you like. I had a friend who immigrated from Poland at she was 8 years old, so she could speak Polish and Ukrainian without an accent, and she could speak English without an accent. Right? It was just all straight up. She even dreamed in both languages.
Wow.
Depending upon who she was talking to, it was really cool. If she was talking to one of her friends from school, she spoke in English, but if she's speaking to her family, it was always in Polish or Ukrainian. So, kind of awesome. One of the things I think we do a crappy job of in this country is teaching our kids another language. I expect everybody to speak our language, and we don't even do it well.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point. Like when I was growing up as a kid, I never wanted to learn French. Walter, my parents forced me to, and in good faith, obviously, because if I don't know French in Montreal, you can't really get a job. You can't get great opportunities.
Right.
But now it's really cool. It's not really cool speaking French in Montreal, but when I go to the US and I speak French, people are like, "Oh my God, is he like from France or something?" And I go, "Yes, I own the Eiffel Tower." It's like one of them.
Well, like I said, it's a cool thing. I knew somebody that used to speak French in an elevator just to make people think that they were a foreigner. She was weird, but I don't know. So I go down a little rabbit hole sometimes. So apologize. So let's talk a little bit about your journey to be this sort of master talk. Somebody that really can help somebody master communication, whether that be from a stage or in a meeting. So can you talk a little bit about the journey, how you got there?
Absolutely, Walter. So I went to business school, and my objective coming out of business school is not to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't to be a coach, definitely not a communications professional. I studied in accounting and I graduated. I want to be a numbers guy, be an executive at like Deloitte or something, or an IBM or a McKinsey. I wasn't looking to be this high-flying YouTuber and making all these videos. But what happened, Walter, was when I got into school, I started doing these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were like, yeah, that's the way you explain it. So other guys my age were like playing football or something, or baseball or basketball, things you wouldn't really see me playing because I'd die on the field. I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak.
But so then as I got... I think people actually do presentations for like a competitive event.
You got it. But the reason isn't really sexy or anything. The reason is because a lot of companies sponsor these competitions. So they come out, their executives come to these, a lot of people in your audience, frankly, they would come out to these competitions and they'll recruit the best talent from out of them. That's why they spend a lot of dineros sponsoring these things. and I saw it as my ticket out of poverty. So I did the competitions, but I accidentally really loved them and grew an obsession towards them.
So you found a passion for something and you followed it. And what, but the accounting is sort of still the degree as a baseline. You understand how numbers are supposed to work and you can read a P&L.
You got it. So what happened was I interned at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was my dream job at the time when I was like 20 years old, Walter. And then I switched to management consulting. Like I wanted to work at McKinsey or Bain or BCG or IBM. So I got a job in IBM's consulting division. So at this point, like Mastertalk doesn't exist. I'm just coaching other people how to speak in the program, not really for money. I didn't even know coaching was a profession. I was just helping them so they could win competitions. And I just accidentally built the skill set in it. So when I started working in the consulting division at IBM, I also started the YouTube channel just for fun. I was just making videos on speaking. I just never thought it would turn into a business.
And you just kind of fell into it.
Yeah, I always like to say communication chose me.
Well, it's not uncommon. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and we will have a tendency to we want to solve problems, we want to help people, right? That's usually a motivator. Sometimes it's money, but the ones that are really passionate about something, they're really trying to help people. And I think the ones that are the most happy are the ones that accept what they're really good at and realize that there's an audience for that, and then go figure out a way to make it work. And that's but you had that, you developed the skill because you were having fun, went and did some other things, and then came back to the fun, right? So you never really have to work.
Pretty much, Walter. I mean, isn't it crazy? Like I spend my days doing interviews, like and coaching people how to speak. Like it's wild, and I'm really grateful for it. And that's what happened 9 months into Master Talk. I was just making videos for fun, and then I went out to some guy's conference in Columbus, Ohio, literally the most random place on earth. Lewis Howes is the guy's name. He has a podcast like this one.
Hmm.
And then I got to his conference and I met my business partner that was 20 years older than me. And he's the guy who really helped me really bring the bare bones of the business acumen to this game. And I was able to really
Put a
make it work.
structure around it.
Yeah. Because before I didn't
Yeah.
really have clients, right? I was just making videos for fun. The only clients I had was the clients I was serving at IBM. But that was mostly software implementations. That's what I was doing primarily. But then he was like, hey, that VP that's your boss, he'll spend thousands of dollars on coaching if it gets him his next promotion. And I said, well, why would he hire a 23-year-old? And he looked at me and he's like, because you got the energy, you have the skill set for it. Just give it a shot. You never know what happens. And he ended up being right, man. But the mission I think is more important, Walter, is to help everybody on earth become a great speaker. That's really my North Star. And I have clients who help me get there along the way. That's all.
It's a. I was at an event yesterday where the speaker was talking about a niche, right, and being able to really define what you're doing. And he got to the fact about that he was an introvert and that he struggled to do what he was doing, be on stage, be entertaining, have energy, right, and keep 120 people, riveted to what he was saying. And he had good information. And I was sitting back and trying to watch his structure and what he was doing. He had slides, but they were informational that helped him illustrate a point. He wasn't, doing that reading of the PowerPoint thing. And it, he's like, he worked with somebody like yourself to help him get there, to get comfortable with it, and come out of his shell. And he said that he does speaking engagements. He does 3 to 5 a month. Um,
It's amazing.
and not to hundreds of thousands of people, but 100 people here, 300 people there, a couple thousand there. Um, and the first time I had to do that, like most people, I was terrified. Not because I didn't know the material, but I was going to have to talk to this group of people, and for some reason, it was terrifying for me. I still don't. I'm not comfortable with it. I can go one on one with anybody, talk about anything, and be comfortable, but it's just all of a sudden that spotlight's on me, and it makes me feel odd. Um,
Mm.
Any insight as to why some of our brains work like that?
For sure, Walter. And thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So for me, it all starts with, why do we speak in the first place? Like, why did we learn this skill? And the answer is high school, middle school. And the reason, even if for a lot of people listening, it was a long time ago, that's what we learn, the skill set of communication, how to present in a formal way. Whereas all of those presentations, Walter, have three main challenges. Number one, all of those presentations are mandatory. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, Walter, you want to get breakfast and present all day?" Nobody says that. Right? So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is everything that we present is never tied to our passions. So it's never, "Hey, Walter, what are you excited about? Are you excited about sales, cigars?" Probably not as a 12-year-old kid, hopefully. Sales,
No,
right?
not.
Business, design, fashion. No, you got to talk about the Renaissance and Shakespearean poetry. And you don't really have a
Mm.
choice in the matter. And then problem three, which is the worst one, is every bloody presentation is tied to a punishment. So if you don't do a great job, not only,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yes. So not only do you not get a pat on the back, you get a slap in the face. You lose 20% of your grades as a 12-year-old kid, and you're nervous every time you go up to the podium because there's always something on the line. So we grow up believing, Walter, that communication is a chore. So it becomes one, and nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes.
So I love that. That's a great way to describe it. And to me, it's just one more failure of our educational system, not teaching our young people to think about something in a way that is transferable to life. Which your story reminded me. I have a daughter who will be 21 in a couple of months, and she went to International Academy, and one of her classes as a freshman, like her first class in high school as a freshman, was a speaking class, right, where they had to constantly be doing different types of speaking. And I remember her telling us this after the first day. She's like, her first day freshman year, a speaking class which they call communications, and he said it was going to be the most important class they have and the most fun. So that's how he started this off. Like, we're going to have a good time this semester, and he did something that he took away one of the threes. They got to choose topics for what they were going to give their presentations on, but they had to do it in different formats to meet the requirements. But they could choose to talk about playing a guitar, or riding horses, or whatever it was that they wanted to do. And that got her, like, to this day she has no problem getting up and talking in front of people. It's so you make a really valid point that I can say that it worked for my 20-year-old. She loves talking to people.
That's amazing. It's great to hear.
It's one of the few things I got right in the education piece. So those three things, that makes sense. It's why we fear it and why we struggle with it. So how do you go about working with somebody on changing that? Because it's a mindset thing that we got to get out of our own head, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
how do you go about that?
Yeah, Walter, for me, and I'm super glad that your daughter had such a great experience because most people don't, unfortunately, in the education system. So that's good. So the way that I think about it, to keep it real simple, is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, right? Where one of those balls is eye contact, one of them is smiling, one of them is vocal tones, one of them is pacing, body language, storytelling. And as you can see, it gets really overwhelming really quickly. So for me, the question, Walter, has become, what are the three easiest balls to juggle in the air? Because if we can juggle those, then we could build momentum to get really good. It's kind of like in sales, since we're speaking to a lot of sales executives. Sure, you could talk about the pipeline. Sure, you talk about the sales cycle. But the most important thing is to close a deal. Because if you close a deal, you understand the end-to-end game of how to close it. And then you learn from it. You do lessons learned, and then you improve and you make the sales funnel more efficient next time. So it's the
Mm-hmm.
same game with this. We force ourselves into action. So what are those three balls? I'll do one at a time. Ball number one, the random word exercise. Pick a random word like cup, like spoon, like trophy case. Create random presentations out of thin air, out of thin air,
Hmm.
with no preparation, and do that for 60 seconds per word. This serves two main purposes. Number one, it helps you deal with uncertainty. Life is filled with it, Walter. When we're in a sales meeting, the prospect, we've all been there, done that. We've seen some wild prospects in our life. Like, what is he talking about? Like,
Yeah.
why is he talking about his dead cat? Like, we've all been there. So if you could talk about avocados, which brings me to point two, you could talk about anything. If you could make sense out of nonsense, you could make sense out of anything. And oftentimes in sales, depending on which org you're a part of, you're often selling the same product over and over and over again. You'll just naturally get better over time.
Yeah. Okay. So talk about avocados, talk about some innate thing for 60 seconds. Do that consistently daily for a couple of times. Okay.
Correct. But the difference
That's one.
between that and, let's say, role playing, which I'm sure you talk a lot about on the sales podcast, role playing, objectives handling, is the random word exercise is more fun, and you could include your family, and it's a lot less work. So I'll give an example. Let's say we take your daughter, right, 20, 21 years old. That's also a family bonding. Because if you give your daughter a word and say, hey, let's just play this random game over dinner. Like, why don't you give me a word? And then she says, okay, dad, do horse. And you're like, you have to do a random president. Then you give her a word, then she'll do one. So it also becomes a fun way to integrate this in your family life. So
Mm.
that's another way. Another piece is, look, I hope everyone listening to this showers every day. So you got 15 minutes in there. You're not doing anything anyways. So just do the random word exercise for 5 minutes of those 15. So yeah, that's number one.
Okay. Those are three, and they put the phone away at the dinner table, right? So the people are actually speaking to each other and engaging. That's awesome.
Yeah, there
Okay,
you go.
I love it.
So that's exercise one. Exercise two is the question drill. And this really works well with salespeople, is we get asked questions all the time in our life, Walter, at school, at work, at home. But a lot of us, from prospects, a lot of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive. So I'll give you an example with me. A few years ago, I got asked that same question that you asked me earlier. Hey, where do you think the fear of communication comes from? Where do you think that stems from? You know what my answer was back then? My answer was New York City. That's where I thought the fear of communication came from. I was like, I don't know, New York, Chicago, London?
Hmm.
I don't know, man. Like, I basically didn't know the answer. So I just made a joke. So how did I solve for this? Every single day, Walter, for 5 minutes, that's it. I answered one question that I knew the world was either going to ask me about communication or my offer in a sales process, until I had an answer for everything. But if you do this once a day for a year, just once, you'll have answered 365 questions. You'll be bulletproof. And that's what separates the top 1% producers than it to everyone else. And the last piece that we already know is send video messages, for crying out loud. Pick prospects you love, people you love. But you know the problem with this video message thing is we all know it, but the question is not, do I know it? The question is, am I implementing it? And I'll give you a layer, because I know we know that drill. One thing I do with my top 100 clients and promoters, the people who build my book, is I have all of their birthdays on my Google Calendar, and every day I look whose birthday it is. I put a stupid, and let me emphasize the word, I put a stupid birthday hat on that I bought for $10 of Amazon, and I open my stupid camera and I go, hey, look whose birthday it is. It's yours. Hope you're having a wonderful day. And you would think people hate it. People love it. It doesn't matter if they're the CEO of a $1 billion company, or if they're like a 21-year-old out of college who got their mom to pay for my communication program. Doesn't matter who they are. They love that exercise. They love that video, and it makes their day, because I'm the only one sending it on their birthday.
And it takes you 30 seconds, right?
Literally.
Maybe 60 to find the hat.
Literally. The hat's right there, actually, because I have to send so many videos. I have like hundreds of people on this list now. So I'm sending
Wow,
a video message at least once or twice a week, minimum.
nice. But that's taking action with something that we hear, right? And that was one of the things that the speaker yesterday talked about. You're gonna learn some stuff today. You're gonna learn a lot of things, but the question is that you need to ask yourself at the end of the day. And he circled back to it. What are you going to take action on? Because it's great to know all this stuff, but if you don't do anything with it, It's knowledge that's just sitting in the trunk. It's not doing anything. You're wasted that. You wasted the day sitting in that room. Maybe you got some free coffee and a lunch, but you didn't really implement anything if you don't take some kind of action. And those are like, especially the second one, right? That applies directly to salespeople working on something that they need to work on. Trust me, I talk to them every day, and they need that kind of repetition and practice because they don't get, they all hate role playing. It's one of the most powerful coaching tools that we have, but they all hate it. It's a safe environment, right? Better to screw up in a role play than it is to screw up with somebody that's potentially a buyer. And the random word thing just keeps your mind sharp, allows you to be able, gives you that confidence, right? I mean, if nothing else, if you can go talk about an avocado for 60 seconds and have some fun with that, then you can get off track when you're on stage or making a presentation, and buy yourself a couple of seconds to get back into what you need to do. It's those are great. Those are great, and you related them to the audience super well. You should be in communications and helping people figure this stuff
I
out.
really should. A lot of people tell me that, but you know what? I think I'll just stick to where I am and stay being an accountant or something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that having some fun, right? Because we all know we're supposed to do videos, right? And that little happy birthday thing or whatever the mission would be for somebody else to do. Um, those just need to be short, to the point, have a little energy to them. What else is important if you're going to send somebody a video message to kind of show your personality and to show you care? Got to be authentic. What else?
For sure, Walter. Honestly, the most important rule, you would think I would go into all of these intricacies and this is how you need to do in the video. The most important rule that I hammer down my entire client base in our ecosystem is the following. The only rule to video messages is you're not allowed to retake the video. That's it.
Wow.
That's it. You're not allowed to retake the video. The only exception, obviously, is if you're a business owner, you're sending to a very high level account that has strong revenue concentration, but it's a very niche example. Like, I'll give you one. If you're a sales director right now, forget about sending video messages to clients if you're too scared out of your wits to do that. When was the last time you sent a video message to your direct report, to the person that looks up to you at the company? And just appreciating the sales targets that they hit this week. Nobody, I don't know a single sales director or VP who sends video messages to their own staff. Hey, Josh, I saw what you did this week. Hey, Julie, I saw what you did this week. Instead of just buying your Rolex watch for getting your $100,000 bonus, let me also appreciate you and say, hey, I just really appreciate what you've done. And that means so much because we value scarcity, Walter. We value experiences and ideas that we don't get a lot of. So why don't we value the birthday text? Because we get hundreds of them. So if you get a lot of them, you don't care. But that one video message from this weird brown kid in his basement with a birthday hat on,
With the hat?
you don't get that in your life. And that's
The hat's key in that. You got to
yes.
have the hat.
You literally have to have the hat. That is a big piece. But even without the hat, nobody gets video messages. So the reason that's more valuable than like a Dom Perignon, $300 champagne, is because that client of mine can just go buy that bottle of champagne on their own. They don't care. But that video message, they can't buy that. Money can't buy that because it can only be achieved through time and care towards the person. And that's really the key. And salespeople are just not willing to do the thing.
Well, salespeople aren't willing to do it, but go back to the manager, the sales director, or the leader, CEO of a small company, right? That, because we have people that are motivated extrinsically, and you have people that are motivated intrinsically, and those people that are intrinsically motivated, they want to be part of something. They want to know people care. They want to learn, right? They want to just be part of something bigger than them. And by acknowledging that with that little video, um, it doesn't take a lot of time. It takes a little thought, and it takes some effort. But man, as you said, scarcity, because it's just not done. You would buy loyalty from your people. You would be putting, it's not buying because you're making a deposit,
You're earning
right?
it.
Yeah, you're giving somebody something, and we need to keep giving people things, right? So that before you ask, and if you're given as an employee, if you're giving your people that kind of support, um, even if they screwed something up, you can still send that message that has a positive piece to it. You got it to this far, right? And we'll talk about what we can do next time. But man, you got it farther than you have in the past, or whatever the right message would be in the situation. That's a really powerful thing for our audience here to kind of just contemplate how they can do it. It's probably more powerful than walking to over somebody's desk, slapping them on the back and saying, "Hey, man, great freaking job on that account," right? Because they're not expecting that video, and it's something that they can show their friends, they can show their family. It's a little tiny trophy, right?
I mean, absolutely, you're just nailing this, Walter. And there's a great quote that I always teach people that people can write down. And the quote is, if you communicate 20% better than your competition, you will stand out 100% of the time. So let me repeat that again. If you communicate just 20% better than your competition, you'll stand out the entire time. So let's go about the video message. This isn't about sending the perfect one. It's a more of a binary question. Are we doing it yes or no? Because 90% of your industry isn't even doing it. So even if you're like half passed out and you're sending video messages, it's still better than everyone else. Same thing in my industry. A lot of people don't send video messages in general, but there's nobody in my space who's putting a birthday hat on their birthday and sending a video message. Like nobody's doing that. So because of that, even if I'm not going to say and sit here and tell you I'm the best in the world at what I do, blah blah blah. No, no, no. I still have a lot to learn. We're all learning. But what I
Sure.
will say is the approach is unique and helps me stand out. That's why another quote I can give you is, to be the best is good because you're number one, but to be unique is better because you're the only one. And that's
Hmm.
really the key that will help you stand out from the pack.
And that's what we're really looking for, is to be, Seth Godin talks about, the smallest possible tribe, right? To go to that smallest possible audience and really be something special to them and speak to them and help them in their way, meet them where they are. That'll grow over time if you want it to, but standing out, especially in my industry and with sales, it being different is kind of what I was taught in my first sales training. Was like, if somebody else is doing it, stop, right? Because you want to be different. For the most of the time.
Most of the time. Yeah.
But those are awesome ideas. I love the is it a pointy little birthday hat, or is it like a little derby? What?
Yeah, I got one where it's like it's a hat with four candles. So it's a little bit more deluxe than the typical, because the typical one it breaks too quickly because it's like made out of
Sure.
cardboard. So I bought like a better one so I could just use it for a few years.
So you went with the $10 one instead of the $1.25, and you got a,
There you go.
yeah, okay, makes sense. Value, I love it. Um, so I mean, those are some great tips for salespeople and sales leaders. Pay attention. The video messages, be different. So I mean, in terms of in your business, you've already been talking about this, about being different and standing out. But is there are you doing, like, how are you going about getting business? How are you doing acquisition? Is that something that is just coming to you from all of the videos that you do, word of mouth? What's your process?
For sure, Walter. And what I'll say is at the beginning, especially when you're a founder building your own sales process, I had no idea how this is going to work. Like, what was I better at? Should I do B2C, B2B? What person should I target? And basically, what I did at the beginning, which is a lesson of itself, you just got to throw a bunch of things on the wall and see what sticks. So, B2B is really difficult for somebody like me. I'll tell you why. Because my network is very young. So, they haven't
Hmm.
aged up yet because I'm only 26, right? Even if I have 7 years of coaching experience. So, it's really hard. It's not impossible. Nothing's impossible, but it's really hard for me to break in, even to my own company, my own alma mater. Like I was like pretty good rising star at IBM. I even got a lot of clients from the company. Impossible to break in. It was so hard to work on that sales cycle. So B2B was not my thing. So B2C became my golden star because there's a lot of executives at the top that I later learned in my career, you learn by doing, that say they don't need help, but privately they do. And they don't want their companies to know about it either. So I only have to
Mm-hmm.
sell that person. Often my first clients when I got started, now it's a lot more advanced, but I'm just telling you the journey because I think that's interesting to
Yeah.
tell. So at the beginning, what happened was a lot of the people who took a chance on me, because they really did take a chance on me at the beginning, even if I had the skill set, because of my age, is they said, you know what, Brenden, I've tried 2, 3 other speech coaches before and they sucked. So I'm going to give you a shot. And they would always ask me, like, why would I give you a shot? And I always looked at them and I said, how about I just give you free coaching? And if I get you better results than all of them, which I did, then I send you an invoice. And they go, sure. I mean, I can't say no to that. In one
Right.
hour, they sent me an invoice. Okay. Like I sent them an invoice, they paid after an hour. They figured out that I
Right.
wasn't chop. And then I built up the business. So today, what that looks like, Walter, is 60, 70% word of mouth. Because what's nice about my field and the product that I'm selling, which is obviously communication coaching, it's very obvious to see the before and after. Like if you're the same after I'm done with you, I'm obviously a shitty coach. So what happens is they go,
Or I mean, there are shitty students.
true,
It's not
this is true.
not they're willing to pay. They're willing to do the work to make you feel like they're doing work, but they're not willing to carry the water where they need to do it. But
1000%. But what you're right, 100% aligned. The only thing I would add though is I'm very picky with who I work with because since it's my own corporation, I don't have
Mhm.
to like that's when I was a consultant at IBM. Like you don't have a choice. Like if I want to switch accounts, I don't switch accounts. It's a $30 million account. Brenden, look, we're paying you 6 figures. I know you're unhappy. You got to stay there because you know what you're doing, and the client likes you, so you don't have a choice. But when you're running your own shop, I mean, I think the con of running your own shop is the income's unstable. You have to build demand for yourself and say, hey, bet on me.
Mhm.
There's no big IBM banner behind me or any insert.
There's no logo.
There's no logo, but there's a big pro, which is you get to choose the rules of the game, and I think that's really powerful too.
It is one of the most powerful things that an entrepreneur can do, and that's what you are as an entrepreneur. And is to say, I don't think we're a fit. I don't think you're willing to do the work. I've said, would you like your money back after 2 days of working with somebody? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I just don't get the vibe that you're gonna you're gonna do the things that we need to do. Because the last thing I say to people when we get ready to go and everybody's excited and the agreement is just about to be signed, like, hold on a second. Let me tell you why this might not work. Right. And they're like, what? I'm like, I know we're all excited and I got confidence that this can work. But let me tell you why it won't work. You. You're the reason why this won't work. Right. And then I tell them a story about a similar situation where a salesperson comes to them and says, hey, this guy's crazy. He actually wants me to make phone calls to people I don't know and and talk to them about their problems and try to position our products in a way that makes them want to buy from us. And I've never had to do that before. And they're going to be uncomfortable and they're going to come to you and complain. What you do in that moment is going to make this or break this. So I basically telling them what's going to happen and how they're going to have to fix it. But it's to me that's the best part of doing what we do is that we get to decide um, who it is that we work with and why, because we put too much into it for it not to be rewarding for everybody. Because I want to get paid, right? But to me, the one of the great joys is watching people get better. And from everything that you've said and the passion that I'm hearing, it's like watching somebody go from here to here with their ability to communicate their ideas and close business or whatever it is, right? Whatever that objective is. To me, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Um, so I hear what you're saying, and sales allows us to do that. Owning a business allows us to do that. And that's part of the reason why I started this practice I figured I was going to have to go work for another asshole. So why not be me? And I just did it. And you're right. It's a little bit up and down in the beginning, but then it starts to
Yeah,
ease its way up. Yep. 100%. I love it. And it being young is a factor, but you can overcome,
correct.
and you have. So that's awesome. Um, so so we got audience out there. So talk about if you want to work with salespeople, great. They can reach out to you. But who's the people that really give you energy that you really want to work with to help them? Who's that person? What do they look like?
So to your point, Walter, you're absolutely right. Communication is a mixed bag. So it's really about people who are committed. I mean, our groups have entrepreneurs, coaches, different groups of people. But I would say the one that we outbound for the most and the one we found the most success with is the female executive. Often the female executive, who's usually a vice president or just minted VP. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason is because that person is exceptionally talented, really good at what they do, but they have a ton of imposter syndrome and a lot of insecurity in the boardroom because it's a mostly male dominated area, regardless of the industry they're in. A lot of them are in tech, but it's a wide range. So that's why a lot of those clients work with somebody like me because they see it as an opportunity. There's a quote in corporate which is men get promoted based on their potential, women get promoted based on their performance. So women feel a lot more self-conscious about being perfect. That's why I love working with them more, to be honest, because men always complain and they don't refer a bunch of clients to me, unfortunately. But I like my men too. But yeah, that's my ideal client, though, the women executive.
And it doesn't matter the segment. It doesn't matter. I mean, the market segment or the industry, banking or tech or consulting. You can help them
Yeah.
reach their
Yeah,
potential.
we're pretty agnostic across the board, even amongst men or women. That was more of a joke, but I would say 65 to 70% of them are women. And I would say out of all the segments, the most popular one is mostly tech, but I don't think it's because I have some special secret sauce for tech. It's mostly just because a lot of their companies are more forward thinking and they just pay for it. That's all.
Well, I read a book about. Well, I read a bunch of books about Google, but their coaching philosophy, like they want their executives being coached. They want their people to have outside perspective and to be thinking about things like that, trying to get better. But there are companies that see that as a weakness, right? There's still people that out there that think that mental health is a weakness, and that if you need to go talk to somebody that you're just weak, you should be able to just rub some dirt on it and walk walk it off, when that's not true, and we've known that for a long time. So is that stigma still exists in your world? You still see that?
A bit, but I definitely feel with our generation, it's starting to change quite a bit. Like I'm not, and the reason is because now the companies kind of have to change since the younger generation is becoming the majority of the workforce in the next 5 to 10 years. So they'll just the A pluses across the board will just pick the Googles, they'll pick the Metas, they'll pick the Amazons over the other job offers if they don't have those amenities over time. So we just got to adapt or die at this point.
Yeah, and that's cool. The way the market shifts it, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
But I mean, you said our generation. My generation is that old generation. I'm that last year of the baby boomers. So I kind of got like one foot on both sides of that. I have that certain mindset, and then that other side is like, man, we got to help people where they are. We got to go give them what they need, not make them fit a round peg into a square hole. Um, it's kind of fun to watch that, how that's changed. In my daughter's generation, um, it's a completely different thought process around. She's got a great work ethic. She's got a lot of confidence. She doesn't take crap from people.
Love it.
I mean, sometimes I have to say to her, like, Mara, you can't talk to that person like that because you need him to help you, right? I mean, she's at a car dealership talking to the guy in the maintenance department, the service department, and they're all speak down to women, and they're especially younger women. And she won't back down. She won't accept things, and it's great. I love it. But every once in a while, you got to like, you know, um, accept a little bit. Um, but yeah, she's at that generation that is good at communicating and don't have a fear of sharing their opinions. But I still think that they're not fully thought out in terms of all of the ramifications for what they're thinking about. And that's outside of your purview, or do you ask them questions like how long have you, like a question I've sort of adopted is like how long have you thought that? How long have you believed that?
For sure.
Why are you tied to that?
Absolutely, Walter. You know, the way that I see it, it's not really based on a generation because I don't think you fit the mold of the typical profile they would give to baby boomers, or you're super open-minded, Walter. So I don't think that that narrative necessarily makes sense. I think it's the narrative that the society gives us for each generation. I think it's more of a principle, which is the day that you believe you know everything is the day that you lose. The
Hmm.
day that you feel that all of your ideas are correct is the day that you lose. It just so happens, Walter, that as we get older, all of us, whether you're a Gen Z, you're a baby boomer, our natural tendency is to believe that what we did initially is always going to be right because we found success in it. So when we find success and we make a bunch of money, we get the right relationships and the right health, we just assume those same principles and sets of belief will apply for the rest of the generation. So a baby boomer might say, well, like I stuffed it up and I made it to the top and I won and I made all this money. Like, of course that's right. It's the only way to
Right.
do it because I'm successful. Look at me. I got a big house and a big car and all that stuff. But I'll say that too in 30 years. Well, what do you mean? Like
Maybe.
social media is the only reason I won because social media is important. If I didn't have YouTube, I wouldn't be the person I am. But then the person 30 years younger than me will go, well, "You're wrong because it doesn't apply because the world has changed."
Yeah. That's a solid point. I'm just trying to, and my daughter's helped me with this, is I have an opinion. She has an opinion. But to me, it's about being able to listen to somebody else's opinion, walk it all the way through, and then make a decision like, you know, that's a valid point, or that I like that one part of that, and then you can maybe modify or even decide that you're right. But if you don't listen, and that's the essence of sales, is that we have to listen, and I think it's a big part of communication too, right? That you do have to listen as much as you're talking. And I have a tendency to rattle on like that. But listening is really important in sales.
Absolutely. And it's a topic that most people get wrong because the challenge with listening in sales, Walter, is a lot of people say that. We say that all the time. But we don't give like the tip, like how do I actually practice listening? So for me the tip which is really simple and has nothing to do with sales is pick somebody that you really love in your life, like a best friend of yours, somebody that you it could be somebody you're watching the show with, right? Somebody that you're always growing with, you're listening to new information. And what I want you to do is do a goals call with them. Book 45 minutes in both of your calendars. Let's say I was doing that with you. And what we do during that call is really simple. I just ask you what your top three goals are for the year. You tell me what those goals are, why they're important to you. And for the next 45 minutes, I'm only allowed to either restate what you say, or ask you questions around your goals. So if you say something like, my goal is to grow from, I don't know, 500K ARR to 750, I'll say, or you'll say, grow my sales. I'll say, what does that look like for you in your business, Walter? And I'll just ask you questions. Why is that important to you? And I'm not allowed to give feedback the whole 45 minutes. I'm not allowed to coach. And that exponentially increases our ability to deep listen.
Another great tip, because if you can do that with your friend, then you can translate that, because that's just a conversation. You can translate that to a sales situation or presentation in office or part in a meeting where you're just, you know, you're engaged in that conversation from the perspective of really trying to understand and to listen.
Bingo.
It's another great tip, Brenden.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let me ask this question. You know, do you have a relationship with cigars, either past or present? And I know you're a young man and healthy, so I asked that sort of knowing where I'm coming from. So
For sure, Walter. So I don't have a negative relationship with cigars per se. Like a lot of my friends smoke cigars and cigarettes, but personally, I've never even smoked a cigarette in my life. I actually haven't even gotten drunk once in my life, which I know is really bizarre for a 26 year
there's
old.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing.
I've never had a cigarette either.
Oh, that's
I've never had a cigarette,
fascinating. I love that.
but I have gotten drunk. So
That's okay. Most of us have. So I think my perspective has just always been, I just look at the people older than me and I just go, what can I learn from them? And my dad was an alcoholic. He made a lot of mistakes. So I just said, like, I'll just cut this off, be really wealthy and successful and make a lot of change in the world. And maybe when I'm 85, maybe I'll smoke something and see what happens. But till then, I never felt the need for it. So, yeah.
what's the culture like in Montreal around? I mean, cigars. I mean, I know the French people in France, are comfortable around smoking, but are there cigars? Are there shops around? What's the rules around? What is true? I know Trudeau doesn't have as much sway in Quebec as he does everywhere else, but
It's pretty open, relatively speaking, Walter. I don't think we're allowed to, unless it's a cigar room, like where you can smoke a cigar indoors. But mostly, like, a lot of people do it for sure. It's just what I find in general with cigar culture, at least in Montreal, they don't do it too much publicly. Like I find a lot of people, it's more not like it's a shameful thing or anything. I think it's more just the vibe, like the environment. They usually just do it over
hmm,
drinks at a bar or outside or something.
hmm,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay. So the best way to reach Brenden, we'll have all your contact info in the show notes. But I always like to ask what's your preference for somebody to reach out, because you said something smart. You said a bunch of smart stuff. So how do they reach out to you?
For sure, Walter. Thanks for having me on, man. This is great. So, two ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to reach out to me directly, besides LinkedIn, if you could figure out how to spell my name, is to, yeah, if you can figure it out. But most of you won't. So instead, what I would love for you to do instead is to attend one of my free communication trainings. So a lot of executives, CEOs, even 8-year-old kids, frankly, they jump on this Zoom call. It's free. I do it every 2 weeks live. You can see me present a workshop and you could learn a lot there. And if you want to jump in on that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com.
Rockstarcommunicator.com. We have that in the notes, and that'll be in the in what we push out. It'll be in the notes for all the episodes. So, Brenden, this was excuse me, a total pleasure. Really, some great stuff for our audience and for anyone. And you're I don't say this very often, but I'd love to have you back at some point in the future to talk about this. This is fun. I love it.
Thanks, Walter. Such a pleasure, man. It's the reason I laughed is because most people say that after the recording is done, and you just said it on it. You're like, yeah, usually I hate most of the guests that come on, but I want to have you back on.
I have this problem with honesty.
Yeah.
I'm pretty transparent, so it's hard for people to not be clear about what I'm thinking because it's tends to come out of my mouth.
You
So
definitely give me that
anyway,
energy for sure. Not in a bad way. Not in a bad way by any means.
it's a New York thing.
Yeah.
You just kind of like say what you're thinking, and um, people shouldn't be so sensitive. So appreciate it, Brenden. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.